Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to set up a LAN connection, only this time we're going to use C++ functions rather than using blueprint nodes. Okay, so we've established a LAN connection via blueprints, but it's nice to know how to do these things from C++, so let's do that. Here's our Visual Studio project that was created once we made this C++ project. And here in the Solution Explorer, I'm going to open the source folder and open MP testing and go into mptesting_character.h. I'd like to create a couple of really simple blueprint callable functions here. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom here in the public section and create a couple of functions. The first will be a void function, and I'm going to call this open lobby. And I'll give this a ufunction macro and make it blueprint callable. If you're not familiar with creating functions and making them blueprint callable, I suggest you take one of my other courses on the basics of Unreal Engine C++. Now we can create a function definition for open lobby. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and create a couple other functions. The first, I'm simply going to call this call open level. And in this function, we're basically going to do the same thing we did in blueprints. Now I'm going to add an input parameter to this function of type const fstring, and that's going to be a const reference. And I'll call this address. This will be for that IP address. I'm going to copy the ufunction macro and paste it just above call open level so it's a blueprint callable function. Now there are usually multiple ways to do the same thing in Unreal Engine. I'm going to show you two different ways to open a level, so we'll make two different functions for this. The next one will be called call client travel, and we'll also use const fstring reference for the type for its input parameter. And just like the other functions, we're going to make this blueprint callable. So let's make definitions for both of these. There's the definition for call open level, and we'll also make a definition for call client travel. Now let's open mptesting_character.cpp and take a look at these three functions. The first is open lobby, and for this function, we're going to call a function on the uWorld class. So let's get access to the world. We can say uWorld pointer world and initialize this with the getWorld function. And after checking to see if world is valid, we can then call a function on the world class called server travel. We're going to say world server travel. Now this takes three inputs, but only the first input is required. The others have default values, and we can leave those as is. We simply need to pass in the path name to a new level. We can do this with a string literal. So in double quotes, I'm going to type in the path to our lobby level. Now back here in the editor, I can figure that path out by finding the lobby level, right-clicking on it, and selecting Copy File Path. Now back here in Visual Studio, on the next line, I'm simply going to paste what I copied, and you'll see that it's showing me the file path to the lobby level. Now when we pass in the path to the level, we don't need to pass in the full path. Everything up to and including the content folder can be replaced simply by the word game. So let's do a /, type in game / and then we can type the path to our lobby map. That's going to be third person cpp /maps/lobby. Now we don't need the .umap extension. It's already going to assume it's a .umap, but we do want that listen option. And to tack on an option to this path, we use a question mark, followed by the option, which is going to be listen. This way, we'll travel to the lobby level, and the level will be opened and designated to be a listen server. So I can remove this text that I pasted in here. And now when we call this open lobby function, we'll travel to the lobby level and it'll be set up to be a listen server. Now we need to implement call open level. Now for call open level, we're going to use a gameplay statics function. It's called open level. Now here's the Unreal Engine documentation for this function. It's on gameplay statics, it's called open level, and all we really get here is the function's signature, so it's not terribly informative, but we can get the include for gameplay statics, so we're going to copy that. And back here in mptesting_character.cpp, we're going to paste in that include for gameplay statics. Now we can use gameplay statics functions. In call open level, we're going to use the uGameplay statics function open level. So we're going to say uGameplay statics open level. Now the first input parameter is a world context object. We can pass in this. A world context object is simply an object that exists in the world, and this gives this uGameplayStatics function an object that it can trace back to the world. Most uGameplayStatics functions require a world context object, and since this is a pointer to the instance of the current object we're in, it'll work just fine. Now the next input parameter is of type fname, and it's the level name that we want to open, but we can also pass in an address here, such as an IP address. So we can use our input parameter address. Now, address is an F string, and open level requires an F name. But if we use the asterisk operator, then what gets returned is a C-style string, and that can be accepted by this function since a C-style string can be used to implicitly create a new fname object. So we're passing in a C-style string, and it's going to be whatever string we pass in when we use the node callOpenLevel in blueprints, this being a blueprint callable function. So we've implemented callOpenLevel. Now another way to travel to a level is by the use of a function called clientTravel. Now here's the Unreal Engine documentation for clientTravel. You can see it's a function on the player controller class. So we're going to need the player controller to call this. And it says travel to a different map or IP address. So in order to call clientTravel, we need the player controller. And we can get that from the game instance. So if we call get game instance, this function returns a uGame instance. And from uGame instance, there's a function for getting the first local player controller. It's called get first local player controller. This function returns an A player controller, and we can simply store this in a local variable of type A player controller pointer. So we'll call this player controller, and we'll assign the value returned from get first player controller to our local player controller variable. So once we have the player controller, we can place an if check to make sure it's not null. So if player controller, and inside this if check, we can call the clientTravel function. So we're going to say player controller clientTravel. Now this function actually takes an F string rather than an F name, so that's a difference between clientTravel and OpenLevel. Now this can be an IP address, which is what we're going to pass in when we use this node in blueprints. So we're simply going to pass in address. Now you'll see that we have more inputs, and the next one doesn't have a default value, so we need to supply one. It's of type eTravelType, a particular enum, designed to specify the way that we travel to a new level. We'll talk more about these travel types later. For now, we can just pass in an eTravelType enum constant from among the options in this enum. We're going to choose travel absolute. Again, don't worry, this travel type will be explained in due time. But for now, we know that we can call clientTravel and travel to this address. So let's compile our code. Now, in case you forgot how to compile, you can go to Build and select Build Solution. I simply used Ctrl-Shift-B. Once we've compiled, we can hop back in the editor, and now we're ready to use those blueprint callable functions. So I'm going to go back to the Blueprints folder in third-person CPP and open the third-person character blueprint. Now, instead of using these blueprint nodes, I'd like to use my blueprint callable functions. For the one key, I'd like to call our new blueprint callable function that we called OpenLobby. And this is our C++ function in which we hard-coded the path to the lobby level and called server travel. Now for the two key, I'd like to call our blueprint callable function that we created called callOpenLevel. Now this is going to require an IP address, and I'm simply going to use my local IP address. So I'm going to fill that in. And if you're using your local IP address, you have to make sure that you pass in your IP address and not mine. Otherwise, it won't work. Now for the 3 key, I'd like to use our third blueprint callable function we created called callClientTravel. Now just like our last function, this requires the address. So I'm going to paste in my IP address here as well. Now I can compile and save this, and we're ready to test it out. So I'm going to go back to the lobby and package up this game. Now here's my build folder where I have the previous packaged game. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now from here in the editor, I'm going to go to Platforms, Windows, and Package Project. And I'll select that build folder. So I'll click Select Folder. And now that our packaging is complete, I can send this packaged project over to another computer. So here's my Google Drive where I uploaded the packaged project before. I'm simply going to right-click on this Windows folder and remove it, so that way there's no confusion as to which version of the project I'm using. And now here's my newly packaged project inside of the Windows folder. Take the whole Windows folder and drag it onto my Google Drive. Now once this is finished uploading, I'll go over to my other machine and download and extract it just like I did before. Okay, so once I have my project downloaded on my other machine and I have a tester ready to launch the game and join mine, I'm going to go ahead and launch my packaged executable. So here it is. I'm going to double click to launch it, and I'm going to press the 1 key so we can open the level designated as a listen server. And we'll wait for the other tester on the other machine to press the 2 key. And there they are. And now we're playing connected via LAN connection just like we did before. Only now we've connected via C++ functions instead. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. And now I'm going to launch the game again. And this time, my tester on the other machine is going to join via the 3 key. So I'm going to open the level and wait for them to join. And there they are, and we're ready to play the game. Perfect. In this video, we set up a LAN connection using C++ functions rather than the blueprint nodes we used in the last video. Setting up a LAN connection is relatively easy. The hard part is connecting 2 machines over the internet that are on different networks. The rest of this course will be dedicated to creating games that can be connected over the network rather than simply connecting via LAN. So in the videos to come, we'll learn about how to set up such a connection. I'll see you soon.